Since the moment I started working at this restaurant 6 months ago, the alleyway behind the restaurant has always given me an uncomfortable feeling. To get a layout of this restaurant, it's located in the middle of the downtown, 5 minutes from the Mexico-US border, since we're located in the tip of Texas in the Rio Grande Valley. The alley itself is not located right behind the establishment. You must walk past its patio and then our garage, until you reach the side back door that you have to prop open as the door locks behind you once it's closed. During the day, I'll usually see people walking back and forth across the alley when I go to take out the trash. It's typically a safe location, though it is also prominent for its homeless population. They're usually harmless despite a few that are noticeably mentally ill. My colleagues have even gotten to know a few and have given leftovers whenever possible. I work as a part of the kitchen staff at this restaurant, and most of the time we'll work past 10 p.m. At night, my boss usually never lets the women take out the trash just to be safe. Especially a petite, 5-foot Hispanic, 28-year-old female. Anyway, since the quarantine started, our kitchen staff has become quite small. So I'll usually help take out the trash with one of the other men working. This night was pretty slow and my fellow coworkers and I were encouraged to clean up and leave early. At around 9:45, I decided to get 2 of these slightly full trash bags and take them out back myself, assuming somebody would see me and take the other 2 after me. As I walked past the patio to the garage, my gut began to fluster. I got to the back door and paused. Maybe you should wait, I told myself, but the smell from the bags was nauseating. I pushed the door and propped it open with a brick that we usually kept nearby. The alley was dark and silent, and the air felt menacing. The only light illuminating was from the bulb above the door. I walked quickly to the bins and lifted up the top and dumped the trash. And then slowly, a man stood up from the other side of the dumpster. He wasn't very big, but he looked a lot older. He was sweating, and his demeanor seemed agitated. He must have been crouching and waiting for some time. I jumped back. The man looked at me, eyeing me as my steps moved backward. He shook his head, motioning for me to stop. He was far too close for me to outrun him. I looked at his bushy dark brows and dark eyes, but it was so dark that I couldn't see most of him. His clothes didn't look homeless, but I still assumed he was since it's common for them to be out there at this hour, usually waiting for food. I told him that I didn't have any leftovers, but he shook his head again and took out a medium-sized knife. My eyes widened as I took in a breath. The following exchange took place in Spanish, but I'll translate. I don't have my purse, I was working. I'm still working. Just come with me, he said, using his knife as a pointer. My mouth grimaced. Having no idea where this small amount of courage came from, I said, my friend's coming out right now with the rest of the trash. Now, come now, he said more hurriedly and stepped closer, and I stepped back again, speaking again with a little more tenacity. They all saw me come over here. There's more trash and he's coming right now. He's outside right now. I just need to yell. You are not going to scream. I'll gut you. I don't know what came over me, but I replied with, watch me. We looked at each other, daring each other, and then we both heard footsteps coming from inside the garage, and he ran past me. I stood there breathing again. I didn't even know I was holding my breath. I turned to see my friend John come out of the door. We're almost done over. He stopped after seeing my face. What happened? I explained everything as tears ran down my face. My friend decided to run down the alley to try to catch him, even though I told him not to and that he's gone by now. It was about 5 minutes until he came back. John relayed to me that no one was around except for some homeless guys that we were familiar with. He asked them if they saw anyone running from the alleyway, and they said yeah, but they didn't recognize the man, and he took off in the opposite direction towards the border. John took me back inside and told our boss what had happened. They called the cops, whose station was pretty close by. They sent someone to patrol the area and gather a description from me, which I gave. My boss let me leave early, and John walked me to my car. He told me that it's too bad we don't have a camera back there. It would have been cool to see how I had handled the guy. I smiled slightly, but my stomach was still in knots. He looked at me and apologized. I moved my hand to stop him and told him that I'll be fine. Unfortunately, I still work there, but I've been excused from trash duty from now on. Obviously, they never found him. I don't want to think about what would have happened to me if I was more complicit. Something gave me the courage to argue back to him, and thank goodness that my friend came out just in time. I was 20 years old at the time, and I was working at a Chinese fast food place in the mall. I don't know if any of you have ever wondered, but all the restaurants at a mall's food court are connected by a long hallway behind them that only mall employees are allowed access to. Due to only workers going through there, and for it being hidden, you can imagine that the place is pretty solitary. This is important because this is where the events took place. Now, onto the story. There was a cook in this restaurant. For privacy's sake, I'll refer to as Greg. Greg was Chinese and didn't speak Spanish, my native language, nor English, only Mandarin. He only understood certain words in Spanish like rice, noodles, chicken, and other food items that he cooked so that when we yelled them into the kitchen, he knew what to bring out. Also, I don't know how old he was, but he was easily over 60. So Greg, despite the language barrier, was a very bubbly person. Ever since I started working there, I noticed how he always made silly noises when he came up front to deliver his food, and all the other girls would laugh. He generally seemed very sweet and friendly, and I never heard any of the girls complain about him at all. For all I could tell, he was just friendly with everyone and harmless. With time, as I stopped being the new girl, Greg would become more comfortable around me too, and make beep beep noises when he came to the front to deliver food, as his way of asking me to step out of the way for him. It was actually kind of hilariously cute, and all my other coworkers, like I said, found him pretty harmless, so I began to feel comfortable around him too. A couple of months into the job, I was already familiar with everyone in the staff, Greg included, so I would always wave hello or goodbye to him and he would give me a smile and a wave back. I never thought anything weird of our interactions because they were the same with everyone else that he had interacted with. That was until one day. I was getting back to my shift after my break. I pushed through the employee door to enter the long hallway I had mentioned earlier. You could hear noises from the other workers inside their respective restaurants, but no one was really outside in the hallway. As I was walking towards the restaurant that I worked at, I saw that Greg was just then getting out for his break. He immediately smiled and said my name in the thick accent he always said it with, and I smiled back at him. I didn't feel threatened at all because, like I probably mentioned a million times by now, he had never given me a reason to feel threatened. He's still smiling at me, standing in front of the entrance to my job, so I couldn't really just walk past him. Just as I was nearing him, he extends his arms, basically asking me for a hug. I had seen him hug other girls before, so again, I thought nothing of it and I went in for the hug. Call me naive, At first, it was all fine and dandy, but my shift was about to start, so I had to go. He had been hugging me for a bit too long as well, so not only was I getting antsy, but also uncomfortable. I broke the hug and I tried to push him back gently, signaling to him that I needed to go. And this is when I began to panic. You see, when I tried to push him away, he actually held me tighter and he wouldn't let go. I was confused, so I tried to push against him again, this time a bit more obviously, but he held on even more, pressing me against him. This is when I realized how naive I was, and it caused me to make a huge mistake. I turned my head to glare at him, but the moment I did, he leaned down as if expecting me to look and he tried to kiss me. Okay, now I was really freaking out because this was the first time someone tried to come at me so aggressively, and he didn't speak any of the languages that I spoke, so I didn't know how to tell him to let go of me other than his actions. And before you yell at me for not screaming, at the time I was so shocked that I didn't even think of it. I kind of shut down on that department, and instead I tried to figure out a way to make him let go. All this time, as I'm thinking what the heck to do, he's still trying to kiss me, keeping me in place no matter how much I struggled, and actively following my head with his lips to try to plant one on me. It didn't matter if we didn't speak the same language. I think it was obvious that I wasn't comfortable, so I can't say that he didn't know what he was doing. It was clear that he wasn't going to let go of me until I kissed him, so I did what I first thought of. I stopped moving my head and somehow managed to gather enough courage to look him right in the eye. I saw him lean in again for my lips, and I pretended I was going to let him kiss me. And then literally, at the last second, I turned my head to the side to try and make him kiss my cheek instead. It sort of worked, but I wasn't fast enough, for I still felt his lips peck the corner of my mouth. I felt disgusted, but at least it wasn't as he had wanted it. Just as I had hoped, as soon as he had planted one on me, he broke the hug, holding me at arm's length and gave me this huge grin. He then patted my shoulder before finally letting me go and walking away. I stood there shaken, not really knowing what to do. Eventually I went back to work, but my coworkers asked me if I was okay since apparently I was pale as paper and my arms couldn't stop shaking. I just shrugged them off. I never reported this to my boss, nor did I say anything to my coworkers, partly because I thought this chef was family and they would fire me rather than him, but mostly because I was stupid. However, I did avoid him at all costs for the remaining time that I worked there, and never treated him the same. I also never went alone to the kitchen, nor entered the hallway until it was literally a minute for me to clock in. Eventually, I quit and never returned to that place. I heard he also quit not long after I had. Well, whatever the case, good riddance. I moved to Sandbach in Cheshire, England around 3 or 4 years ago with an ex. Him and I had broken up by this point and we were just friends in the house that we rented and everything was great. We weren't hostile towards each other and found out that we were better friends than in a relationship. I started going out to the bars and local shops to make friends and to see if anyone was as lonely as me by this point. I had moved from Chelsea, London to be with my ex and I didn't know anyone there. This was when I met Craig. Him and I became best friends quickly. He was a little odd, had family in the area, and his own flat, etc. So my ex moved away back with his family, and I couldn't afford the rent on my own. So Craig and I rented our own house in Worcester, where his dad lived. His dad was about a 5-minute drive away from the house that we had settled at. Him and I were just best friends. We didn't do anything romantically, sexually, and he always had a few poor girls in tow. He would tell each of them that they were the one for him, that he loved them, etc. He had around 7 girls on the go at one point. I started seeing this guy, Jay. He would stay over a few times and would eventually become my boyfriend. Craig hated it. We would argue about him, the fact that why he should care anyway. Him and I were only best friends and he needed to stay out of my dating life. It was then things got physical. One night, Craig literally got on top of me in my room, put his knees on my arms and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" And I honestly thought I was going to die. My brain switched to my mom, who was 4 to 5 hours away, and she would never know or would have to come identify the body of her only child. I don't know what it was, but I managed to kick Craig and I ran. He had double locked the front door. He had hidden my bag and had smashed my new iPhone that I had gotten for my parents for my birthday. I was literally running down the stairs with him in tow, yelling how he's going to kill me. I knew the back door was open from him having a smoke earlier, and there was a guarding gate. All I needed to do was open that door. I ran for it, opened it, and made it. The next thing, I'm out on the street in short shorts and a pajama top barefoot. I just ran. I ran for a good half an hour towards town and used a payphone to call 999. The police picked me up. I couldn't get back into the house as Craig had my door key. I told them all the story. They took me to the station and had to unlock it as if it was past 1 in the morning by now. They took photos of my neck that had bruising and my head that was bleeding, where he had smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I had to sit in a patrol car to go to my house and they picked Craig up. He was out on the street looking for me. I had to point him out and say, "That's him" to them. He said that he was looking out for me as he was worried for me. I don't think that's true. I think he was out looking for me to silence me so I wouldn't tell anyone. They arrested him and got told he would stay in a cell overnight, and 2 policemen let me into my house as they used the key Craig had. While I was in the house alone, I gathered my things. I had left my laptop, some clothes, shoes, and makeup in the rush. I thought I could easily replace them and I just wanted to get away, and I was so worried he would come back any second through the front door. I had no purse and no money, no phone. My parents lived 5 hours away. Thankfully, I don't know why, but I had the sense to hide my car keys in my bra earlier that evening. I got into my car and drove to Morrison's petrol station. I was bleeding from my head, no shoes on and bruised. I broke down there and used their phone to call my mom. At first, she was annoyed that I had woken her up, but then I explained everything to her. She ended up putting $200 in the petrol cashier's account for me to fill my car up, get some food and a hot drink to calm down. I then drove to my parents. I later got told through friends of a friend that Craig got released in the morning, as it was his word against mine, and he smashed my laptop up when he found out that I wasn't at home anymore. Whatever. My stuff got replaced and I'm now with an amazing guy who treats me like a queen. Sometimes I get flashbacks of that night where I truly believe I could have died. As for Craig, I blocked him, deleted everything to do with his family and him, changed my number and even broke off friendships with friends that knew me and him. Please, let's never meet again, Craig, because this time, I'll be ready for you. I've never posted on here since I never had a reason, but here I am. Late last night, I was browsing for jobs on Indeed and found this auto detailing job. I applied and didn't think anything of it. Just about 30 minutes ago, I received a call from an unknown number and I answered it. This was the guy from the auto detailing place. The call started off normal. I didn't think anything of it. But I noticed how he just kept talking and talking. And usually when somebody wants to give you an interview for a position, they get straight to the point. He began to tell me about the things they do on a regular day of work. He said they were these so-called vans that they would ride to the client's house to detail their car. And keep this in mind. He started to ask me questions such as, "Are you in school?" Which I replied to him, "I'm not. I have graduated high school a couple years ago and have been looking into college, but I'm not sure about it." He started asking me questions that made me uncomfortable. He asked where my parents worked, and the second that I said my dad works for the government, I could feel the awkwardness in his voice. Straight then, I knew something was up. He was saying that he almost feels bad for me because I'm 19, living with my parents because they have good jobs, and I haven't had the chance to flourish. That started to piss me off. I was just on the phone with him at this point to see what kind of scamming job this was. Finally, he asked me if I wanted to come in for an interview. Again, just doing this to see what he was up to, not actually going. I said yes and eventually asked what the address to the place was. This is where things get messed up. He said, "Well, today you won't have to meet us at the office." So obviously I asked him where I was supposed to meet him for this interview. He said, "I want to show you around the van today and meet the manager." Hold up. You want me to have an interview at an unspecified location in a van? He told me to meet the manager at some random McDonald's, and that there would be a white van with auto detailing written on the truck. Doesn't sound sketchy at all. I told him that I would meet his manager there, obviously not going to, and he wished me good luck. I don't know what kind of shady stuff he was pulling, but I am super uncomfortable. Even in the interview he said, "I know it sounds sketchy, but it's not." Obviously, like I said, I didn't end up actually going. But I really hope that nobody else fell for this scammy job posting. I've had my fair share of creepy people throughout my life. Bucharest is a city where things like this rarely happened, so just take it from me, I had bad luck. First of all, let me just say that I'm not your average scaredy cat dude who legs it when someone stares at them for too long, like I've seen some posters here do. I'm also not going to hide under my bed if my house gets broken into. You better believe I'll stomp their butts with no regards for my own safety. Putting being a keyboard warrior aside, there have been a few moments that I've had with total strangers that have been scarring, genuinely terrifying moments. I'm going to be talking about the most messed up situation that I have ever been in my life, and hope to any god out there that it never happens again. The incident happened 4 years ago before New Year's Eve. I was 18 at the time, and I had finished high school in the summer, and with no activity and nothing else to do, I decided to look for something I could do part-time with my limited skill sets and talents. The only things that I was remotely good at was playing video games and boxing. My mom found out this casting job in a newspaper article, back when she didn't know how to browse the internet, and she called and set up a meeting without really talking to me about it. I decided to play along since I was searching for something anyway, and casting in some shows seemed like an awesome choice. I'm 6'1" and I was skinny at the time, so I figured they could make me wear stuff like a clothing model. Needless to say, my naivety got the best of me, and I didn't realize things did not work that way. I went to the casting studio and the place was a total wreck. It was in some rundown building at the edge of the city. No windows, the bricks in the wall were cracked, and the withering vegetation was getting a hold of the place. It was also strange that there were no people around, but I figured this is the city's edge and all, then it should be a normal sight. I realized that there was no front door, so I went down some stairway on the far end of the building, which led me to a rotted wooden door. There was no handle or anything, so I didn't even know if I should push or try to pull it with the tip of my finger somehow. I decided that it must be the wrong place, so I called the number which my mom provided me with, and somebody answered. It was, well, she said that she was a woman, but I thought she was a man at first. She had a very low-pitched voice. She was very sweet and patient with me, and told me that this is indeed the building that I should go into, and that I should try to hold the door and push it up a bit, and then pull it towards me slowly so it wouldn't break from the hinges, and not to be afraid when I come inside because it's going to be pitch black. Apparently there's no electricity in that area, so I would just need to go forward until I feel another door, and that'll take me to another hallway which is completely lit up and take me to their office. Now hold up. What kind of insane person do you think I am to do this? I watched way too many horror movies to know this is all kinds of bad. The lady on the other side gave me a brief explanation on why the office was like this. Apparently, this was an apartment complex built in the 60s, but it got really wrecked after the '77 earthquake, which killed quite a few people because some of the pillars on the second floor were unstable beforehand. So they had to close it and no one's really done anything with it since. Since this casting company's budget was really low, they couldn't afford to have a nice looking office and to be in a good looking place, or at least a safe one. If you're having trouble with logic here, they were her words and not mine. One thing that I found sketchy is that somewhere in this conversation, she said, "You're alone, yeah?" I thought it was a bit strange, as if she could see me somehow. Her story seemed legit though. I closed the call, opened the rotting door, and sure enough, darkness. I should point out that when I pulled the door to me, there was a chair in front of it, probably to block it from collapsing inward as it apparently swung both ways because of its state of decay. I activated my phone flashlight to look around and it was really empty. Just a few chairs in the corner, and a white ragged and dirty looking tarp on the ground next to them. The door in the front had the same aspect of rotting wood. I figured that they would at least renovate that one to make it look more appealing. I pushed the door gently and it opens with a very loud creak. I think I should have pulled it. But this one didn't have a handle as well. Everything was still dark. I started questioning the system that they use and the fact that they're not professional. The lady told me that this hallway would be lit up, yet it wasn't. With my phone flashlight still on, I scanned the room for clues as to where the office might be. I know how this must seem to you listening to this. How did I not pick up on this incredibly sketchy situation? I'm just used to this. In the past, me and my parents didn't have light sources in our backyard, so whenever I needed to get something from the pantry, which also did not have a light source, I would do so in total darkness. This whole thing was getting on my nerves, so I deactivated my flashlight and decided to call the phone number again. As soon as I put my phone on my ear and the light it emitted went out, I heard a loud creak behind me, the sound of the rotting door that I pushed out earlier getting put back into place. I jumped at the sound and let out a sharp yell. I instinctively put my phone out, but the light the dial screen was letting out was too weak to see in front of me. "Hello?" I asked in a worried voice. No response. But in a second, I could hear the dial tone from my phone and hear a Nokia ringtone, the piano one, from the other side of the room where the door had been closed. I stay silent for a moment and the ringing stops. I have never been more horrified in my life. I crouched down and started moving along the wall to my left, as quickly and quietly as possible. I hear very quiet footsteps coming from my right, but I couldn't tell if they were coming toward me. I formulated a very basic escape plan in an instant. I had a general idea of where the door was, and the footsteps seemed to be directionless. I took 2 coins of 50 bani out of my back pocket and threw them at the other side of the room, and then I booked it. I pushed on the edge of the door at first because I ran away way too fast and had no idea where the door was exactly, and then I pushed against it to get out of the room. I tripped because I expected no resistance, yet a chair was blocking the other side. I heard scampered footsteps behind me and slight grunts. I get up and run away in the dark room with no regards to what I may hit on my path. I just knew the exit would be right in front of me. Sure enough, I hit another chair on the way, the one that I found blocking the door at the entrance, and it propelled me so hard that I bashed the door and knocked it off its hinges. I opened my eyes and I was outside, so my first instinct was screaming for help at the top of my lungs. I looked at the building and finally see him. A tall, overweight man, probably around 300 pounds, carrying a cloth in one of his hands. He was wearing a white tank top and jeans or sweatpants. I really couldn't be bothered to notice at the time. The expression on his face was one of pure anger. I scampered about and ran up the stairs as quickly as I could, and then turned right to go into town. I ran for about 3 or 4 minutes at full speed, not stopping for anything, until I finally reached the main street and I saw a lot of cars again. I was still in a panic state, so I beelined it for the nearest taxi and told him to take me the heck home. I called my mom when I was halfway home and told her everything that just happened. She felt sick to her stomach and started crying that she put me in a situation that I might have died. Later that day, I filed a report to our nearest police station and they sent a dispatch there. We were informed that they found traces of a few blunts which had cannabis sativa and a double-edged razor on the ground. They also found a broken Nokia flip phone in the dirt outside. My parents told the police that if they found out anything else, to please contact them. This has left me with some serious issues, as I know I feel very anxious whenever I go to a job interview. I only feel relatively safe if the location is in a very public place and the interview is at rush hour. One man did this to me. So kids, stay safe and remember, your martial arts training doesn't mean crap when you're scared out of your mind. I applied on a job website recently for a serving position at a restaurant. I was contacted by someone through the messaging option through the site. The place was a Burmese restaurant. I ended up Googling the address and found out where it was. The next day, the person messaging me told me an address that didn't show up on Google. I thought it was odd, but oh well. Today, the interview was at 9 a.m. The restaurant being open this early was surprising to me. I used Google Maps and to find the location. I am always early, and I'm glad that I was. The location was not even open for business. The paper on the door said the restaurant is opening in April, and it had a completely different name than the ad had stated. I looked inside and the building looked abandoned and very dilapidated. Okay, pretty weird. I stand off to the side to scope things out because I'm having a very bad feeling that this may be some setup trap to lure a person or a girl like me into a place for an attack. And then I notice a man who looks to be high on a stimulant, wearing nice clothing, watching me. He smiles and laughs and then does this bird whistle and goes to the side of the restaurant. A few minutes later, a man in an Audi SUV shows up, looks at me, starts laughing and meets up with the first guy. They are both around the side and I start wondering if there is a door to get in that way that I didn't know about. I start hearing the men bird whistling, and to my terror, I hear multiple other bird whistles coming from all around the block. However, I see no one. How many people are out there? Why are they hiding in the bushes? I get freaked out. I was going to tell the interviewer to do the interview outside because if I get locked in there, I know that I'm stuck. I ended up trusting my intuition and getting the heck out of there. Nothing bad happened, luckily, because I decided to trust my gut. I feel like society tries to get women to think they're being paranoid in this kind of situation. Then, if something horrible happens, people say, "Gee, she should have been more careful. What was she thinking?" I just wanted to share. I am unsure what to do because nothing happened. I don't really know how to approach this without any technical evidence. I want to contact the job site or police to look into it, but I feel like they won't care. Let me know if you guys have any other ideas. This happened to me in 2016, but I was having trouble sleeping tonight, and my brain dredged this up from my memories. I had recently moved back to my college town so I could rent an apartment with a friend after a long-term relationship had ended. I was doing a lot of job hunting for pretty much anything, as I was pretty desperate for income and unsuccessful with finding work within my career field. I was using multiple job sites, but mostly Indeed, because I liked their website features that helped you track which jobs you applied for and their status. There were, of course, some jobs that I applied for on their own websites, but I kept track. After a couple of weeks of searching, I get a call. I don't recognize the number and the area code wasn't familiar, but I pick it up as it might be a job prospect. A woman is on the end and she says that she's calling to set up an interview as I had applied for their company. The company's name was not something that I remembered applying for. While on the phone with her, I quickly pulled up Indeed on my laptop and looked through all of the jobs that I had applied for. None matched. I have no idea what this job is, but don't make this apparent on the phone, as I've been job searching for weeks and I'm still unemployed. I asked her for the address of the building and I write it down. Looking back, I can't remember the name that she gave me, but what I do remember was how pushy she was into scheduling the interview for later that evening. I agree to the interview, and I thank her, but as I hang up, I get a very bad feeling. Something doesn't seem right, so I Google the phone number, and it's not linked to a company. I Google the address, and it's also not affiliated with a company. It's from way outside the distance of jobs that I was applying for, almost an hour away from where I live. I pull up Google Street View, and all I can see for the address that she gave me is several smaller rundown buildings with a highway exit in the distance. It looked desolate. I pictured myself driving there around dusk when she scheduled the interview, and I could physically feel this sensation of dread settle in me. I didn't want to go. I brought all of this up to my roomie at the time, and he said that I might be overthinking it, but if I wasn't comfortable with it, to not go. I'm so glad that I didn't go. The more time passes, the more I'm aware of just how shady it was. In hindsight, I wish that I had gone to the police, but I didn't at the time because the year prior, I hadn't had much faith in them. I had tried to get a restraining order for an ex who was telling me that he was going to hurt me, and he was harassing me from burner phone numbers. Who knows what could have happened if I had gone. It's a scary thought, really. This happened a good 20 plus years ago, and I had forgotten about it until this day. I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things can happen when you least expect it. This event really made me feel like I couldn't be safe anywhere, and caused me to be hypervigilant every time I left my house. And that feeling stayed with me for a long time afterwards. Also, a trigger warning. This involves assault of a sexual nature. It was wintertime, about 11 in the morning, and I was standing at a bus stop. This bus stop was in a mini mall, where there is a bigger department store, a dollar store, and a little shop. I was going to catch the bus to my brand new job, and that day was going to be my very first day at the new shop. So I was excited and nervous and definitely wanted to make a good impression. While I was waiting for the bus, I realized I was a good 15 minutes early and also that I had forgotten my gloves, and it was bitterly cold out and my hands were freezing. But I only had a couple of dollars on me, so I figured it would be cheapest to buy new gloves at the dollar store. And when I went into the store, it was quite big, but there were no other people in there yet, besides this older man behind the front counter. He gave me a big smile and came around the counter to stand next to me. I asked him where the gloves were located, and he said, "I show you." As soon as he had said this, he laughingly grabs my left hand with his right one and starts bringing me back towards the back of the store. The back of the store had a display table with some stuff on it, toys I think. On the wall behind the table is a section with winter items on it, and just to the right of that is a door that says, "Employees Only." Everything happened really fast. When he grabbed my hand and started bringing me towards the back, I just kind of awkwardly laughed because he was laughing, and I just thought that he was an overly friendly guy who was trying to be super helpful. I had also been in the store a couple of times before this, and both times the same guy was there. But he was ringing people up and he was always happy, smiley and laughy with every customer he interacted with. I never got any weird vibes any other time I was in there. So, just as we got to that back area, out of nowhere, the hand holding mine clamps around my wrist really hard. His other hand reaches over, grabs my breast ridiculously hard, twists it, and starts trying to push me towards the employees only door. I couldn't believe how fast everything changed and this happened. I'm so happy that I had worn my shit-kicking boots that day, because the only thing I could do was kick him in the shin and try to pull away from him. We went back and forth with me trying to get away from him, while he tried to get a hold of my arm tighter, and while also trying to push me towards the door while I'm still trying to land kicks. And in all of this, he lost his balance and started to fall onto the display table. And then I was able to get my arm away, and I just took off running as fast as I could. I ran into the back of the big store next door. They had a customer service department there where there were other people and phones. So to try to wrap this up, I used the store's phone to call my mom because I don't know why. I was confused if I should call the cops. I was trying to figure out what just happened, while also realizing shit. I had missed the bus and I'm going to mess up my first day at the new job. I did call the cops though, after I got off the phone with my mom who came to get me. The way I looked at it was like, okay, I was alright, but what if I hadn't gotten so lucky? What if this guy does this to someone else and they don't get away? What if something even worse could happen to someone else, or already did? This happened in broad daylight, on a weekday morning, so this could happen to anyone. They arrested him and we had to go down to the station to give my statement. About a week later, there's an article in the newspaper that they arrested 5 people that owned the dollar store because they had apparently been setting up these dollar stores for a few weeks as a front for some shady stuff, and then they would close it down, wait a month or two, go to a different county and open another one. Like I said in the beginning of this messed with me for quite a while after that. I didn't feel safe when I left my house. I just wanted to buy a dang pair of gloves that day. So guy from the dollar store, please, let's not meet again. To start things off, this incident occurred in a small town community, where it's not really crime-ridden or exactly dangerous. Around this time last year, I was working full-time at a little Japanese retailer shop at the mall near my house. My schedule fluctuated, but the majority of my shifts were closing shifts. I preferred this because it gave me enough time to sleep in and make myself a lunch, catch the bus, get to the mall a bit earlier to buy snacks and a drink, before I would begin my dreaded 8.5-hour shift. On one particular day, as I was getting ready to walk to the bus stop, I saw a big commotion going on right across from my house, at the town hall. I crossed these streets right in time before several other police cars and an ambulance rushed by, sirens wailing so loud. I'm sure the entire neighborhood heard them. I was wondering what was going on, but quickly disregarded it, as I got on the first bus nearby my house. I got off at the intersection where I was supposed to take a second bus that leads straight to the terminal across the mall. While I was waiting at the shelter, I see a guy around my age in his mid-20s staring right at me, with eyes so black and empty. Mind you, there was no one else around besides the two of us. I remember thinking to myself that it seemed odd he was wearing a sweater with a heavy-looking backpack and construction boots, both of which were oversized for his tall, slim figure, when it was blazing hot outside. Not even for a split second did he tear his gaze away from me, and then it quickly hit me that I recognized him as a regular customer that frequently comes in to buy earphones at the store that I worked at. Now, I usually try to keep to myself, but for some reason, I've been told I draw all kinds of people to me with my friendly, positive aura. I felt the need to pretend that I was on my phone to avoid any sort of conversation. He then proceeded to take a seat beside me, still gazing at me, and mustered a "Hi," before going on that he recognized me from work, and if I was going there right now and so on. When the bus finally arrived, we both got on and he took a seat next to me. We had small talk about random stuff and our hobbies. He went on to tell me that he was in a broken relationship with his parents, where he ended up getting kicked out. I assumed that he was homeless at first, but he kind of confirmed it subtly when he told me that he's been couch surfing between friends' houses. We finally reached the bus terminal that's across the mall. He ended up walking me to my work. I didn't ask him to, before going off on his own way. Before departing, he asked for my phone number, which I stupidly gave to him and told me, if you ever just want to chill or smoke with me, to text him. After conversing with him, I shrugged off any preconceived judgment that I had of him earlier of being creepy, for just a guy that's socially awkward and perma-fried. He ended up texting me later on that night asking to hang out, but I cut the conversation short, telling him that I was tired and also I had to work the next day. I never heard from him again. Now, here's where things get interesting. After a few days and then weeks, news reports were coming out that there was a violent sexual assault that occurred right where the trails were across my house, near the town hall. The victim was a teenage girl who was going for a walk when she was struck with an unknown object by the suspect. He happened to be armed with a gun and proceeded to assault her before leaving the scene. It took about a week for the police to find the suspect. The investigation was ongoing. It shook up the entire community. Nothing like this had happened before. It's fairly peaceful and close-knit, and it's scary because it happened right in broad daylight. So when police released images of the suspect with his name, following his arrest, I damn near had a heart attack. It was him, the same guy who I met at the bus stop, who would walk me to my work, who asked for my number, who was texting me throughout the day, after committing the crime. He had the same dark, black empty eyes, long hair, and wearing the exact sweater, backpack, and shoes. I started looking at past news reports to compare the dates and times to when he texted me, and they all matched. Needless to say, my intuition about people are on and off, and that I should learn to trust it more. I felt a bit of guilt hoping I could have done something earlier, but there was no way for me to know until after. This happened about a year ago. Everything was spread out over a couple of months. I'm known for being a very smiley, bubbly, and social girl. Okay, here's my experience. At the time this happened, I was the only person who did to-go orders, answered all phones and customer questions as well as greeting and cashing out to-go or delivery orders. It was mid-December and where I live, we have a massive Christmas festival and tree lighting. So at the time, I was getting multiple phone calls asking if we would be open if there are any specials, and so on. I answered the phone and the typical script was said, blah blah blah. He was nice, but after I answered his questions about our restaurant, he started asking questions about me, my age, how long I had worked there, if I was from where the restaurant was located. I felt weird but made an excuse that he didn't have any more questions about the restaurant and I needed to go. He told me that I sounded beautiful and he couldn't wait to meet me. It bothered me a little, but I soon forgot about it. Jump forward a few weeks. The festival's here and we're busy. I'm helping in all aspects of the restaurant, and our bartender comes and grabs me and tells me a man at her table wanted to speak to me. Me thinking that it was a complaint, I tell her okay and I put my best customer service smile on and I go over. Hi everyone, I hope everyone's okay over here, but I heard from our wonderful bartender. One of you wanted to speak with me. My god, you're as beautiful as I dreamed you'd be. It's me, the guy you spoke to a few weeks ago. You were so amazing and I just loved you since then. I was visibly freaked out, and I said, "Oh, thank you. Is anything else the matter?" He said, "No, I just had to see what my new wife looked like." "Oh, well, I've got to go. Y'all have a great night," I responded. I walked away a little nervous, but soon I got distracted. The bartender comes over and tells me that the guy, John, wanted to say goodbye. So I give a smile and I wave, but that was not good enough. He comes to me, arms open, and wants a hug. I awkwardly smile and try to give a distant side hug. And not good enough for him. He grabs my shoulder, causing me to face forward, and gives me a really tight and hard hug. The night's over and I just ignore my uneasy feelings. I end up becoming sick for a couple of days. I come back and my manager comes to speak to me and tells me that John had called the restaurant around 56 times and would only want to speak to me. As we're discussing this, the bartender tells me someone wants to speak with me on the phone. I go behind the bar and answer, and guess who? It's John telling me that he loved seeing me and couldn't wait for us to get married. I hung up. My manager and I just decided to block the phone number. I finish my shift and I start walking to my car. I notice a car parked weirdly in the parking lot. I just giggle and ignore it. The car starts pulling up and says something. I'm not paying attention though, and I don't really hear them. I get into my car and I start replying to texts and I check my phone. I notice the same car is now parked beside me. The window is cracked so I can see that they are facing me, but I can't tell much else. The car then continuously pulls up to each side of my car and stares at me from each side for 5 minutes or so. I notice that it's John, so I'm scared. I was too scared to drive off, thinking that he would follow me. The only thing I could think to do was call my job. 4 guys come sprinting out of the back with knives and the car drives off. We don't have cameras in our parking lot. It's really crappy, I know. They calm me down and I drive home, watching everything around me. That night, my phone started acting extremely weird, shutting on and off, out of control as in apps are opening, even though I haven't touched them and it has never happened before. I decided to shut my phone off completely, knowing that I had another option of calling someone if need be. I wake up the next morning feeling nervous. I get ready for work and I head out to my car. As I'm pulling away, I notice something on the side of my house. I go up to see it's 2 pocket knives. One appeared to have blood on it. The other was above my head, so I had to step back and notice the second knife was stabbed into the picture. I noticed that it's a picture of me at the store shopping. I was done and I called the police. They take my statement and do the whole process you have to go through when reporting something like this. To make this long story a bit shorter, 2 other scary things that happened were pictures taken of me at random times, and areas were thrown all over my deck and a note left in my car at work that said, "Hi pretty, I love you." The paper looked like it had been soaked in blood. It was fake though. So now the number is blocked, Everyone in my restaurant knows what this man looks like. I get walked in and out of my job by a male manager or a coworker. I have cameras everywhere and weapons. I hate having to do this, but it's for my protection. Nothing has happened for a bit. I just figured others would find this interesting, or maybe it would help someone else and make them feel less alone. This was about 6 or 7 years ago when I was 17. I worked as a soft-line clothing sales associate at a large chain department store. My job was to walk around the floor and essentially keep everything organized. I would fold clothes, clean out the fitting rooms, put items that had been returned back in the right place, and help out any customers who needed it. Generally, I liked the job. It was easy, and all the girls that I worked with were around my age and really cool. One of my least favorite parts of the job was answering phone calls. The customer service desk would put relevant calls through to the phone in the appropriate department, for example, women's or kids, and whomever was assigned to that area for their shift would have to answer it. These calls usually consisted of speaking to an employee from another store location about finding an item and putting it on hold for a customer, or speaking to a customer directly about whether or not we had an item that they were looking for. It wouldn't have been so bad if the phones were cordless, but they were not. I have too many memories of having to run back and forth between the phone and the rest of the store, as I looked for whatever the person on the other end had wanted. But I digress. One particular summer day, I remember because the uniform was khakis and a hideous green polo year-round, so I was sweating my ass off. There was a call for the kids department. I made my way over to the phone and I took the call. It was a man speaking in a low voice, as if he was trying to be quiet. The conversation went something like this. Hi, do you have any socks? Me being slightly annoyed because this is a clothing store. Obviously we have socks. Yes, we do. How big are they? Do you mean like what size? The kids' socks are just sized like shoes are. So we have socks that fit a range of sizes, like 4 to 6 and so on. Yeah, but like, how big are they about? I was very annoyed now because, what did he want from me? I don't know how to answer that. What size shoe does the kid you're shopping for wear? Oh, I'm using for an experiment. That's the last part of the conversation I really remember. It was at that point that I was creeped out by more than his voice, because he sounded like a weirdo. I don't remember how the call ended. I know for sure I maintained my professionalism and found a way out of it, because I can remember telling the girl that I was working with at the time. I ended up telling most of the girls who worked in soft lines with me, because, all creepiness aside, I found it genuinely hilarious. It might be worth mentioning once again that all of us who worked in the clothing department in this store were high school age students. It didn't take super long for one of my colleagues to get a similar phone call. We happened to be working together, and she came to tell me about the weird phone call she just had. We compared our experiences and decided at this point that we should tell a manager, since it apparently wasn't a one-off thing. The manager at the time was a woman around my mother's age, who also happened to have a daughter in high school. I was relieved when she looked disturbed as we recounted our stories, and told us to come get her should he call back. And if you guessed it, he did indeed call back. You get a cookie. The next few times he called, the same colleague got him, and she said the conversation always started with him asking for socks and becoming progressively more creepy. He would always ask really specific questions about how big the socks were and what colors we had. When he asked anything about what he needed for them, he always gave some vague, creepy answer like, an experiment. The way that she described it, he seemed to be escalating from his first few calls. It seemed like he would ask more questions or be breathing more loudly as he called back more often. What bothers me the most about this now, though, is that it always had to be kids' socks. He always called the kids' department, and he always confirmed he was looking for kids' socks when asked if he would rather be put through to the men's department. The next time I got the call, I tried to be subtle about the fact that I was getting a manager. I think that someone else had made the mistake of saying something like, "Hold on, let me ask my manager." And by the time the manager got the call, he had already hung up. As soon as I heard, "Do you have any socks?" I fought the urge to vomit as I tried to be casual. After he asked his inevitable, weirdly specific questions about these sock sizes, I told him that I had to place them on hold so that I could go check. Of course, I bolted for the manager's office at the back of the store, probably looking like a lunatic. My manager dropped what she was doing to come back to the phone with me and take the call. The dude was still on the line when she picked up the phone, but as soon as she introduced herself and asked how she could help, he hung up. I didn't hear anything about him calling again after that, and I sincerely hoped he got scared enough to knock it off. More likely though, he just started calling somewhere else. This may not seem that creepy. At the time I thought it was relatively harmless, but I've since heard similar stories about weird calls to retail workers, which prompted me to share this here.